Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some more fascinating psychology.
Always. What are we exploring today?
Well, this time we're taking a deep dive into a classic, Understanding Human Nature by Alfred Adler.
Oh, Adler. His work is incredible, even though it was published way back in 1918. Still so relevant.
Right. Especially his focus on applying psychology to everyday situations. No dusty theories here.
Definitely. He wanted to make psychology practical, something we could actually use to understand ourselves and the people around us.
Which is exactly why we're talking about it today.
I like it. So where do we begin?
Well, let's start with the foundation. How does Adler define human nature? Is that like the same thing as personality?
Good question. He actually makes a distinction. Think of human nature as our core desires, the why. Those deep-seated longings for things like happiness.
Okay, so like everyone wants to be happy,
Mm.
right?
Or even a sense of superiority, which might sound kind of strange at first.
Superiority. I'm intrigued.
It's not about being better than everyone else, but about striving for a sense of competence and mastery in life.
Okay, that makes more sense. So that's human nature. But what about personality? Where does that fit in?
Well, Adler sees personality as the how. It's the collection of habits and behaviors we develop in our attempts to fulfill those core desires.
So human nature is like the fuel and personality is the engine.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. Adler believed that understanding the difference between the why and the how is key to really getting people. Like he gives this example of a charming young man who just can't seem to settle down, always jumping from one relationship to the next.
I think I've met that guy. On the surface, you'd think he's just afraid of commitment.
Right, that's the surface level.
Yeah.
But Adler digs deeper and uncovers that this guy's childhood was full of neglect.
Oh, wow. So that early experience left him with what? A fear of being alone.
More like a deep-seated need for constant validation. So all that dating wasn't really about romance. It was about subconsciously trying to prove his worth.
Wow, so his surface desire was connection, but his underlying motivation was something else entirely.
Exactly. And that's the power of understanding human nature. It's about seeing beyond those surface-level behaviors and getting to the heart of the matter. And, it's not just about other people. It's about understanding ourselves, too.
That's so true. We can be pretty mysterious even to ourselves sometimes. But how do we actually do that? How do we start to uncover those hidden motivations?
Well, Adler believed that our everyday habits are like windows into those hidden motivations. He even said they were like a window to the soul.
So you're saying that my late-night online shopping sprees are telling me something deep about myself. What would they say?
Well, maybe. But think about it this way. Those habits, whether it's online shopping or something else, they start as conscious choices. But over time, they become automatic.
Makes sense our brains love to be efficient.
Right. Our brains are always looking for shortcuts. So those automatic habits, even the ones that seem strange or even self-destructive, they actually start to make sense when you understand the why behind them.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this works, but do you have like a real-life example?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Adler actually talks about this woman who experienced really intense nightmares and hallucinations.
Okay, that's a little more intense than late-night shopping.
It was. But what's fascinating is that after each episode, her parents, who were generally emotionally distant, would shower her with attention.
So even though it seems so extreme, her behavior was actually a way of getting the love she needed.
Exactly. Her subconscious found a way to fulfill that need for connection, even if it was in a roundabout, kind of unhealthy way.
It makes you think twice about judging someone's actions at face value, right? There's always more to the story.
Absolutely. And that's why understanding personal history is so important, especially those childhood experiences. They hold a lot of clues to why we do the things we do.
Like a secret decoder ring for human behavior. So if personality is formed by these ingrained habits, are there different types of personalities we can look for?
Adler did offer some broad categories. He talked about those who are more socially oriented, generally optimistic, cooperative, always thinking about how to help others.
Okay, the helpers and givers of the world. I get that.
Then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the more self-centered personality type, competitive, driven by personal gain, maybe a bit more aggressive.
So kind of like a spectrum of me first versus we first, but I'm guessing most people aren't purely one or the other.
Right. Adler believed that healthy individuals find that balance between looking out for themselves and being mindful of others. It's that sweet spot between self-interest and social harmony.
Makes sense. So it's not about being a saint or a ruthless competitor. It's about finding that middle ground. But how do we actually find that balance? And where do emotions fit into all of this?
Well, Adler had some insightful things to say about emotions. He saw intense negative emotions as signals, not necessarily problems in themselves. For example, imagine a parent who's constantly blowing up at their kid for not doing chores.
I think we've all been there at some point.
Right. It's easy to jump to bad parenting, but Adler would say, hold on, let's dig a little deeper. Is it really about the chores? Or could it be something more? Maybe the parent is feeling powerless or frustrated in other areas of their life, and it's coming out sideways.
So the outburst is just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. There's always something more underneath. And that's why understanding and managing emotions is so crucial. It's not about suppressing anger or sadness, but about figuring out what they're trying to tell us and then addressing the root cause.
Oh, it's about channeling that energy into positive action rather than letting it control you. I like that.
It's a shift in perspective, and that's what Adler is all about.
So we're starting to see how understanding those deeper motivations can be a game changer. But how does this actually play out in real life? Like, can you give us an example?
Oh, absolutely. Relationships are a perfect example. Let's say you have a couple who's constantly fighting about money.
Oh, yeah, that's relatable. One's a spender, the other's a saver, and they just can't seem to get on the same page.
Exactly. But if we use Adler's framework, we can move beyond that surface-level disagreement about finances and start to look at their underlying motivations. Maybe the spender is driven by a need for instant gratification. Perhaps they grew up feeling deprived and now they're trying to make up for it.
That makes sense. And what about the saver? What could be going on there?
Well, the saver might be subconsciously trying to control their environment. Maybe their past was filled with instability or uncertainty, and now they find comfort in having a tight grip on their finances.
So it's not really about the money itself. It's about those deeper emotional needs that aren't being met.
Exactly. And once those needs are brought to light, it can create a whole new level of understanding and empathy in the relationship. Suddenly, it's not about blame or accusations. It's about recognizing where the other person is coming from and finding ways to address those deeper needs.
So instead of battling over your spreadsheet, they might need to have a heart-to-heart about their individual fears and insecurities.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful. Adler believed that understanding is the key to resolving conflict.
That makes me think about those times when an argument just spirals out of control, logic goes out the window and everyone's just reacting emotionally.
Ah, yes, the power of emotions. Remember, Adler saw those intense emotions as signals, not necessarily the problem in and of themselves. So let's say you're getting triggered by your partner's chronic lateness.
Oh, been there.
It's worth asking yourself, okay, what deeper insecurity is this tapping into? What need is not being met?
Maybe it's about feeling disrespected or unimportant, like your time doesn't matter to them.
Exactly. And once you identify that deeper need, you can communicate it in a way that invites understanding. Instead of yelling, "You're always late," you can try something like, "When you're late, it makes me feel like my time isn't valued."
Oh, that's so much better. It shifts the focus from blame to actually expressing your needs in a way that the other person can hear.
And it opens the door to a real conversation rather than just an argument.
Okay, this is giving me a whole new perspective on how to handle conflict. But what about when you're just plain angry? Is it okay to express anger in those moments?
Adler wouldn't advocate for suppressing emotions, but he would encourage expressing anger in a constructive way. Instead of just lashing out, try hitting the pause button. Acknowledge the anger. And then ask yourself, what's the most effective way to communicate my needs and work towards a solution? How can I use this energy productively?
So it's about channeling that emotional energy into positive action rather than letting it control the situation.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility for your emotions and using them as tools for growth and understanding.
This is such a valuable takeaway. It's not about denying our emotions, but about understanding what they're trying to tell us and then using that knowledge to navigate our relationships in a more mindful way. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about self-understanding. Adler believed that our behavior patterns are often driven by what he called a life goal.
Yes, it's this subconscious striving that shapes our choices and actions, almost like an internal compass that guides us, even if we're not fully aware of it.
So it's like this driving force behind the scenes, shaping our decisions and actions. But what happens if that life goal isn't actually serving us? What if it's holding us back?
That's where things can get a little tricky. Sometimes those life goals, even though they're subconscious, they can be quite limiting. For example, someone might have a subconscious life goal of avoiding failure at all costs.
Oh, I can see how that would be a problem.
Right. This could lead them to play it safe all the time, never taking risks or truly challenging themselves. Ultimately, it hinders their growth and keeps them stuck in a rut.
It's like they're trapped in this cycle of self-sabotage. So how do we uncover these hidden life goals? How do we figure out what's driving us beneath the surface?
Well, Adler believed that, like with so many things, early childhood experiences hold a lot of clues. He encouraged people to reflect on their earliest memories, those vivid snapshots from childhood.
It's like those core memories from inside out.
Yes, exactly like that. And look for recurring themes. What were your biggest fears back then? What did you strive for? What messages did you internalize about yourself and the world?
So if someone's earliest memory is of being scolded for getting their clothes dirty, it might suggest a life goal of always striving for perfection and avoiding criticism.
Exactly. By understanding those early influences, you can start to challenge those limiting beliefs and consciously choose a more empowering life goal. You can rewrite this script, so to speak.
Wow, this is making me rethink so many things about my own behavior. It's like looking at yourself through a whole new lens. But it's also incredibly empowering. If our personalities are shaped by habits, and those habits are driven by these subconscious goals, then we have the power to change those goals and rewrite our own stories.
That's the essence of Adlerian psychology. It's a call to action, an invitation to become the architects of our own lives. It's about recognizing that we have more agency than we often realize.
We're not just passive passengers on this journey. We have the ability to take the wheel and steer ourselves in a new direction.
It's about taking ownership of our choices, understanding our motivations, and consciously creating the life we want to live.
This has been such a mind-expanding conversation. We're learning that our behaviors aren't just random quirks. They're meaningful expressions of our deepest needs and desires. And once we understand those motivations, we can start to make more conscious choices that lead to greater fulfillment and connection. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of Adler's insights. There's so much more to explore.
Absolutely, and that's what's so exciting about this work. It's a journey of ongoing self-discovery.
Before we move on, I want to touch on one more crucial aspect of Adler's work that we haven't discussed fully: the importance of social connection.
Yes, the cornerstone of Adlerian psychology. Adler believed that humans are fundamentally social beings. Our well-being is deeply intertwined with our sense of belonging and contribution to something greater than ourselves.
So it's not just about understanding ourselves in isolation, it's about understanding our place in the larger web of life.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of social interest comes in. That drive to connect with others and contribute to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness and realizing that true fulfillment comes from playing our part in the grand scheme of things.
So it's not about being selfless all the time, but about finding that balance between self-interest and the interests of others. That sweet spot we talked about earlier.
Precisely. Adler believed that a lack of social interest is at the root of many psychological struggles. When we feel isolated, disconnected, or lacking purpose, it can lead to feelings of inferiority, anxiety, and even depression. It's like being adrift at sea without an anchor.
That makes so much sense. When we're solely focused on ourselves, our world shrinks and problems feel insurmountable. But when we connect with others and contribute to something bigger, we gain perspective and a sense of belonging. It's like we tap into a source of strength and purpose that lies beyond ourselves.
It's like plugging into a power source. And it doesn't have to be about grand gestures or saving the world. It can be as simple as being kind to a stranger, volunteering in your community, or just being present and supportive in your relationships.
So it's about recognizing that we're all in this together and our well-being is intertwined. It's a beautiful reminder that we're not alone and we all have the power to make a difference.
It's about recognizing the power of collective action and understanding that even small acts of kindness and contribution can have a ripple effect, creating a more compassionate and harmonious world.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've uncovered so many powerful insights about human nature, motivation, and the importance of social connection. But I know we've only just scratched the surface of Adler's work.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn and explore on the journey of self-discovery.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about human nature, those deep-seated desires that drive us. And we've explored how our personalities, those unique sets of habits, are shaped by those motivations. But what I'm really curious about is, where do we go from here? How do we actually put these insights into practice?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it? It's one thing to understand the theory, but how do we actually make it real in our lives?
Exactly. We're not just here for an intellectual exercise. We want to walk away with some tangible tools and insights that we can actually use.
And luckily, Adler gives us a lot to work with. He believed that change is always possible. He really emphasized that, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He didn't see people as fixed or determined by their pasts. He saw us as dynamic beings, always capable of growth and transformation.
Absolutely. And a big part of that growth, he believed, came from understanding our limiting beliefs and, if necessary, choosing a new, more empowering life goal to strive for.
It's like hitting the reset button on those old patterns that aren't serving us anymore.
Exactly. It's about rewriting the script, moving from autopilot to becoming the conscious authors of our own lives.
And a big part of that, as we talked about, is recognizing the importance of social connection, right? It's not just about understanding ourselves in isolation, but understanding our place in the larger web of life.
Exactly. Adler believed that contributing to something beyond ourselves, whether it's our families, our communities, or even something on a global scale, is actually essential for our own happiness and well-being.
So it's not about being selfless all the time, but about finding that balance between self-interest and the interests of others, right? That sweet spot we talked about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. That balance is key.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn it over to you, our listeners. How can you take all of these insights we've discussed and make them your own? What can you do starting today to apply these principles to your life?
Well, I think a great place to start is to just pay attention. Start noticing those patterns in your own behavior and in your relationships. Ask yourself, what need might be driving this action? In myself or in someone else?
Don't be afraid to dig deep, to really explore those underlying motivations. And remember, like we talked about earlier, early childhood experiences can hold a lot of clues.
You know, those core memories, like we were talking about earlier, they could be super revealing.
So take some time to reflect on those early memories. See if you can identify any recurring themes. And then ask yourself, are those old stories still serving me? Or is it time to write a new ending?
Because you do have the power to write a new ending. That's what's so exciting about this work.
It's about recognizing that we have more agency than we often realize, and that change is always possible.
It's about stepping into our power and becoming the conscious creators of our own lives. And as we do that, remember the importance of connection, of reaching out, of contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, and that even small acts of kindness and contribution can make a difference. In a world that often feels divided and chaotic, Adler's message of social interest, of striving for a common good, feels so timely, so relevant.
It's a reminder that we're not alone and that we all have the power to make the world a better, more compassionate, and more harmonious place.
So that's it for this deep dive into Alfred Adler's Understanding Human Nature. We hope you found this exploration as thought-provoking and insightful as we did. Remember, this is just the beginning of the journey. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep connecting, and keep growing. Until next time.